For the Newport Historical Society. Today, on June 10th, 1985, I'm interviewing Mr. Edward J. Corcoran for our oral history project. Mr. Corcoran, let's start with some facts about your own life. Let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
But came to Newport when my father died when I was about 4 years old. I came back to Newport. My mother was a Newport woman. And I lived in Newport till about 40 years ago when I moved to Middletown.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me something about your parents. How did, first of all, who were your parents? What was your mother's name?
My mother's name, she always went by the name of Annie J. Corcoran. Her real Christian name was Honora. Apparently she didn't like it. She always called it Annie. My father's name was Edward James Corcoran. He was an Edward J., but his middle name was James. Mine's John.
Oh.
He was born I think, in Lawrence, Massachusetts. My mother was born in Negorny, Michigan. But it just happened that her father was working out there at that time because he was really a Newport man.
I see. How did they meet each other then? Had your father's family moved to Newport?
I don't know that, no.
So what was he doing in Fall River, your father, when you were born?
He had a jewelry store in Fall River, jewelry and silver, and he was an engraver as well as a jewelry salesman.
Mm-hmm.
His father, he came naturally by it because his father was an engraver for the designs in the textile mills, in those days. He worked for a long while, I don't know where, but in Massachusetts somewhere in the textile industry. I know very little about because I'm too young, about my life in Fall River.
Mm-hmm.
But after my father died, my mother's sister lived in Newport, and she came and lived with my sister, who worked for a lawyer by the name of Francis B. Peckam. And Francis B. Peckam invited my mother to come and live with her sister in his house.
Oh.
So that I lived in his house until I moved out to Middletown.
Oh, I see. And did your mother work in some way for Mr. Peckam?
No, she never worked for Mr. Peckam. She was more or less of a practical nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked off and on at that, I know at the end of the Spanish-American War, an interesting thing, they had a little hospital off Wellington Avenue in Newport. And there was a nurse named Miss Tuck, Adeline Tuck, who I think was head of the hospital, and they brought all of the soldiers back in this area who were suffering from typhoid.
Oh.
There were more killed in typhoid in the Spanish-American War than through combat, But a lot of the soldiers became ill with it, and they were brought back here. And my mother worked over there for a while, nursing the soldiers. And I think after that she went off once in a while on private cases, but for the most part she didn't work during my childhood. And she wasn't very well herself. She didn't enjoy good health, and and she died when she was 64 years old.
Tell me about Mr. Peckam. Did he have a family of his own?
No, Mr. Peckam. Mr. Peckam was married, and his wife died shortly before I came to live there. And he had no children.
Where did he live? Where was his home?
9 Central Street in Newport. He was one of the ablest lawyers in the state of Rhode Island, I guess. He was invited 2 or 3 times to be appointed to the Rhode Island Supreme Court, but he declined.
Oh.
He didn't care for it. He was a contemporary of the old Mr. Sheffield, William Payne Sheffield, and they were both very good lawyers. At that time, there weren't very many lawyers in Newport. Today, there are almost 100, I think.
And still some Sheffields and as lawyers and.
Yeah. So.
Now, your firm has Peckam in the name. Is that same Mr. Peckam?
Yeah. No, that isn't the same Mr. Peckham's in the firm name.
Oh.
Mr. Peckam was a practiced law by himself, and then invited a young lawyer, Clark Burdick, when he graduated from law school, to come and be associated with him. There was never a firm, but he worked for Mr. Burdick, for Mr. Peckam. Then after Mr. Peckam died, Mr. Burdick took in Mr. William McLeod, who was a Newport man, young lawyer, and the firm became Burdick and McLeod. Then William A. Peckam, who was a great friend of mine, but no relation to the Mr. Peckam with whom I lived. He was a graduate of Harvard Law School, went to high school with me, and we were very close friends. He and I came into the Mr. Burdick's office in 1918. Well, I came in 1918, and he came the following spring in 1919. And then, after Mr. McLeod left the firm, he left the firm after the Second World War. Let's see, after the First World War. Mr. Burdick eventually took Peckam and me in, became Burdick, Corcoran, and Peckam. And then after that, Mr. Hayes came in. Mr. Burdick died in 1948, and eventually the firm became Corcoran, Peckam, and Hayes.
Oh.
That's where it is today. Oh. But the firm, the law office was located on Thames Street, right near the government landing, right across from Cotton's Court. And that office dates back, I guess, to the middle of the last century.
Oh.
So this office over 100 years old, well over 100 years old.
Oh, quite remarkable.
Yeah, well, Sheffield's office, same way. Old Mr. Sheffield, the contemporary Francis P. Peckam, had a son, William P. Sheffield, who went to Congress, and he had a son, William P. Sheffield, and William P. Sheffield has a son, Richard Sheffield, who's now the present. Have you met him?
Yes,
Yeah,
he's our neighbor.
Oh yes, of course
yes.
he is. Yeah, that's right. Well, he's the great grandson of the original William P. Sheffield. So those two firms are neck and neck as far as longevity.
Yes, and there's many generations.
Yes,
I understand
that's right.
you have a third generation of your family.
Yeah,
in
now
the
I
firm.
have a third generation of my family. Yeah, that's
Wonderful.
right.
So how did you decide to go into law?
Well, I think I had a great admiration growing up for Mr. Francis B. Peckam.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Looking back, I think that must have been it, that I admired him so much. And, of course, he was my great patron because he left money for my education.
Oh, he did.
Mm. And he died when I was 10 years old. He died in 1903.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had any questions. These boys today, they don't know what they want to do, but I always wanted to go to the law.
Well, that was wonderful. And where did you, where were you educated? Where did you go to school?
Now, I went to a private school that was located on the corner of Tour Street and Whitfield Place, right opposite the fire station there. I know you're familiar, near the Historical Society, you know, right up the street from the Historical Society. That school was run by two ladies, one by the name of Miss Sayer, S-A-Y-E-R, and the other by Miss Caroline Wilkes. They were both very good teachers. And in that school, I suppose there were, maybe 20 or 25 pupils. And I stayed there until my second year in high school. I went to Rogers my second year. I didn't go to the first year in Rogers. And I think it was I got a very good fundamental education there.
Was this school coeducational or just boys in those days?
Oh no, co-ed.
Co-ed.
We didn't have that distinction. You know, the elementary schools were all co-ed. You know, yeah. There were more girls than boys in it, but there were Bill Sheffield went there for a while. And, I can think of 4 or 5 boys that were there.
Now, how far was the school from your home?
Only about Tour Street, then Barney Street, then Mann Avenue, and you go down Mann Avenue and the street running through from Mann Avenue to, Bull Street. From Bull Street to Mann Avenue is where I lived, so I'd say, 2 blocks.
So it was,
3 blocks.
So you easily
Oh,
walked.
yes, I walked to school every day.
Right.
That's right. So,
Tell me what, when you were that age in grammar school and early high school, when you weren't going to school, what did you do for fun and recreation? Did you have any kind of organized sports at school?
No.
Neighborhood?
No, back at the school, there was a big lot, and we used to go out there and play all sorts of, games, cops and robbers, and then we played out in the court, tag and things like that. No, there wasn't. There was no organized sports in those days.
So what did you do? What did you and your friends do besides, did you play any baseball and that sort of thing?
Oh, yes. We had, there was a family that I was very closely associated with named Langley. Alfred G. Langley was a musician. He taught piano. He also was organist in the Congregational Church, and he lived right down the street on School Street, corner of School and Tour, right across from the Christian Science and Historical Society. And his oldest boy was quite an organizer, and he organized a club called the Hilton Club. And I was a member of the Hilton Club, and that club had baseball teams. We didn't play football, but we had baseball teams, and that was about it for sports. His oldest boy was a viola player in the Boston Philharmonic Boston Symphony, and also later in the New York Philharmonic.
Oh.
He's a very talented violinist.
Yes.
One of my great interests in those days, through another son of Mr. Langley, Howard Langley, was brooking. We used to go out on Saturday morning all over the island and follow the brooks on the island down to their sources.
Oh.
You know, down to the ocean. That was great fun. We'd take a picnic, take a sandwich or something, and be out all day. And we got to know the island very well that way.
Sure you did.
So that was... And in those days, there was always something to do. But organized sport, except for our baseball team, no, there wasn't any.
How about in the summer, the beaches? What were the beaches like in those days?
The first beach in Newport was the place to go in summertime. That's where everybody went. They developed the beach. They had a private bathing section, and then they had a boardwalk that extended down almost, 2/3 of the length of the beach. And along that boardwalk, there were all sorts of little shops, and a roller coaster, and a big convention hall, and a big restaurant for shore dinners. And that's where everybody went. That was the place in the summer. And the excursion boats used to come down from Providence every day in the summer and dock at Commercial Wharf, and the trolley car went down the wharf, and they'd load on the trolley car and down to the beaches. So, and then at the beach, they had these, I suppose we used to call them butt boards. That they were long wagons with maybe 3 or 4 tiers of seats, you know.
Yeah.
And people would hire those, and they'd be driven around the Ocean Drive and told all sorts of fabricated stories about the wealthy people.
Yeah. Do you remember any of those houses going up on Ocean Drive? Most of them were probably already there. Some were still being built around the turn of the century.
The first house, as you go around the drive, right back of what we call Bailey's Beach, Spouting Rock Beach, that big white house stands up there. That was owned by Mrs. Tish, Mrs. Stuyvesant Tish. She was supposed to be the leader of society at that time. She had all sorts of parties there, you know, which I knew nothing about, but I'd heard about them afterwards. That was one of the places. I don't remember too many places around the drive at that time.
What do the local people in Newport think about these places? And summer homes have been built in Newport for hundreds of years, but when people began to build those great palatial places, what did you think that
I don't know.
the local people thought of it?
I don't know. You see, they were all in place before I got to be an age where I noticed any of those things. See, I think the Breakers was built in 1893 during that period.
That's right.
Yeah. They were all up and well established, and of course, as I told you the other day, the people came there to those houses.
Well, tell me again.
Well, they came in the summer, and they brought with them a retinue of servants, although they had quite a few local people too. Usually they were interested in, they had their own coaches and their own carriages, so they came with a number of horses which were stables. You know, they had stables around. Take the breakers, they had the stables down on Corcoran Avenue. And the husbands went back and forth to New York. They came up for weekends and they went back, you know, Monday morning or Sunday night, and they went either on the New York boat from Newport to New York, or they went by a steamer over to Wickford and then took a little shuttle train to Wickford Junction and took the train there to New York. And that was a common thing. And of course, in those days, all of these big estates had beautiful gardens and employed quite a few gardeners to take care of them. And that was a very profitable occupation. And there's some very fine gardeners who came to Newport, established here. Very often Scotch descent, you know. And they were a source. The summer people, the summer colony, was a source of considerable revenue to the city of Newport. I suppose the summer people, the Navy, that's about it. We had very few industries here. Various industries came and never seemed to make a go of it, you know. Common Sense Gum Factory came here, and they eventually left. And this apparently the labor supply was limited here, and didn't attract labor from outside, so they never made a go of it here.
You suppose being an island has something to do with that too? The reason why industry?
I suppose so. In those days, of course, the only bridge was out at Tiverton, the old stone bridge. There was a bridge for the trains and a bridge for carriages, horse-drawn vehicles. But there was no, of course, the Newport, the Mount Hope Bridge wasn't built till long after that. So they were pretty isolated. And by and large, the greater part of the island was a farming community. I've seen, you know, the time when most of your houses would be along the main roads, and all the backland was farm country, which is nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
So a lot of that has certainly changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. But it's, the whole lifestyle of Newport has changed, I'd say, in the last, when did the Navy go out of here?
Mid-70s, isn't it? Not 73?
Was it 72? Well, the lifestyle has changed with the departure of the Navy, because of the tourist business developing kind of entirely different.
Yeah.
Newport didn't change much up to the 60s, you know, 1960 there. Didn't change very much.
What kind of an influence did the Navy have on the town up till that time?
Well, by and large, I think the relations between the Navy and the townspeople have always been very good. The Navy contributed a great deal to Newport. On the other hand, when it was a training center here for the sailors, they weren't any worse than any large group of young boys.
Right.
You know, there were a lot of in a way, there's a lot of patronage of the saloons and things of that sort. But really, even with all those boys, there was no violence like there is today. You know, we didn't have the robberies or all the crimes at Newport. Oh yeah. I'd say the relations were very good between the Navy and the townspeople, and we surely hated to see them go. But of course now, the Navy that you have on the island is highly skilled people and high salary brackets too. The payroll of the Navy is still very heavy in Newport. We say the Navy's gone. It hasn't gone. We have a great many officers here. We have the Naval War College, and we have the Underwater Ordnance, with a lot of technology, and a lot of this industrial park is filled with people that are selling the software to the Navy, you know. I think it's still a
new industry. Really.
That's right. That's right.
Before we, let's get back a bit to, we were talking about the summer people, and you were describing to me the other day about your observances, particularly their coach rides.
Yeah.
On Sunday. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
I can recall, and everybody did it, going up on the avenue opposite the casino and all along that section of the avenue on a Sunday, and in the afternoon, early afternoon, there'd be a regular parade of these four-horse coaches. Sometimes with the coaches there were phaetons, you know, driven by two horses, and those people had they were high, of course, and they had a coachman and a footman in front, and then they'd have a footman sometimes in the rear. And very often the horses would be all decorated with rosettes on their bridles, and the people all dressed up with the high hats, and the women all flowering gowns. Really, they were on exhibition, and they enjoyed it, and the people enjoyed seeing them, you know. And they were very. There was no association with those people, with the summer people, with the Newport people, except in business dealings or in service.
But not socially.
Not socially. Oh no, no. There was a very, very decided line there. No one would think, you know, being admitted to some of these places, if they tried to be admitted, they wouldn't be admitted. They were people that the local people felt was all right to get as much out of them as they could, and the summer people got to expect it. There was a practice. The butlers or the cooks had great power in those establishments. They did all the ordering, with the result that the townspeople, the butchers and the bakers and candlestick makers, all did business with the cooks or the butlers. And what went on in the way of compensation, you know, it was a recognized thing. There's a very interesting story that Mrs. Harold Brown was told about Mrs. Harold Brown. That mean anything?
You were talking about Mrs. Harold Brown.
There was a coal dealer here in Newport. This is illustrative what I'm saying about power of the cooks and the butlers. And he had been furnishing coal to Mrs. Harold Brown for a number of years. And this particular year, he didn't get the order. So he went to Mrs. Harold Brown and asked for an interview, and he said, told that, you know, he'd always thought he gave a good service. Yes, you always have, Mr. Brown, Mr. Hayes, his name was Hayes. But he said the cook apparently made arrangements with another coal dealer.
Oh.
And she said, well, Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But you know, I can always find someone to sell me coal, but I can't always get a good cook.
Oh, dear.
So unfortunately, she condoned it. They
Yeah.
all condoned that practice. And she was, by the way, a very, very nice, real Newport woman. Some of these people, you know, just came here for the summer, but the Browns were more or less
the
had
John
their
Nicholas
roots.
Brown
Yeah,
family, the Providence
yeah,
Brown.
that's right. They had their roots here in
Yeah.
Rhode Island and in Providence and Newport. And she was I've met Mrs. Brown. She was a real lady, a very, very fine person. So she really was regretful that it happened. But that tells the story. That's the way it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was accepted on both sides. There
Yeah.
wasn't any real resentment in the town.
No, it was the way of life.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I suspect that if any arrangement that was made was worth anything. Now also,
Wait.
oh, yeah.
I guess it's all right.
Also in connection with the horses, of course, they had the National Horse Show here, in which all of those coaches would, you know, compete for prizes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was held at the casino. Now, I'm not sure whether it was actually on the casino grounds or on Privy Park right back of the casino.
Mm-hmm.
But I know it was held under the auspices of the casino, you know. And I can just barely remember going to one of those.
Were they held every year? Once a year?
That I can't say. Really, I can't remember where they were. The tennis was held every year, but I don't know about the horse show.
Well, the horse show then did it stop when the when the summer colony began to decline? Or,
No, I don't think it was a decline in of the number of people of the summer colony. I think it was due to the fact that a great many of them were shifting to automobiles and giving up the coaches. And maybe the expense became increasingly great for them, you know, because it was a very expensive sport, you might say.
Yeah.
But
So how many people would partake in this Sunday parade?
oh, that's hard to remember.
Would there be quite a few?
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, you know, there might be there might be 24 vehicles, not all coaches, you know, but there might be. I can remember an incident. Henry A.C. Taylor was a very wealthy man. They always used to say that Taylor lived on the income of his income. And he was a big man, and he came. He was driving a coach up near the casino, and a truck driver, I don't know whether he was passing in his truck, but anyhow, he apparently interfered with the progress of the coach, and Taylor had a whip to reach out and hit the front team horses, long whip, and he leaned over and gave this fellow a crack with the whip. The fellow jumped right down from his truck. He went and he grabbed the front team of horses, and he shook his fist at Taylor. He said, "If you ever do that again to me, I'll get up there and pull you right down off the top of that coach." Taylor, pulled himself in. The truck driver went on to parade, but that was quite an incident.
Did you witness this, or did you just hear about it?
I think I saw that.
Uh-huh.
It's hard to tell, whether those things are told to you or whether you've seen them.
Yeah.
But I always remember that so distinctly. I think I must have seen that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's a terrific story, and good for him.
But no, it was a very it was very much like the English system, the caste system in England. These very wealthy people, they ate the English a good deal.
I think so.
Yeah, there was a lot of there's some intermarriage with English royalty, and they were not beloved by the summer people, by the townspeople, but they were, accepted because they were good for the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't generalize because there's some very nice ones too.
Mm-hmm.
People
sure.
that that treated their health well, and the people with the health were devoted to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like any other group of people. You can't generalize.
What do you think brought about the demise of the so-called Gilded Era here in Newport?
Well, the big spenders, a lot of people say that the income tax started it.
Mm-hmm.
Then the thing that finished it was the Depression.
Right.
That really, things were never the same after that. There was a shrinkage in fortunes. They couldn't afford to live on the scale that they formerly had, and also I think there began to be a change in the Depression brought down a lot of people to a common level,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was good in a way, that after that there never was that great cleavage between the rich and the... Yes?
I'd just like to interrupt a minute and explain that we had to move from one room to another, so now we will continue.
Oh, I see, yeah.
I'll explain.
All right.
Exactly, do you remember what we were talking about?
Well, you asked me when they ceased to be...
About the decline of the summer colony. Right?
Yeah, the decline of the summer colony. There wasn't a decline in the people who came here so much. I think that the decline was in the spending, and I think that was largely due first to the income tax and then to the Depression.
Mm-hmm. And there is still a summer colony of sorts here in
Oh,
Newport.
yeah, that's
But
right.
not
Yeah.
on the same scale
No.
as previously.
We had also, that's what was, I think, generally called the winter colony, as distinguished from the summer colony. And the winter colony were people of more wealth than the ordinary Newport people. But at the same time, were not millionaires. They were not the very wealthy people, but they were people, for the most part, of good upbringing and had advantages in bringing in their early lives and had settled down here in Newport and were very fond of Newport, and their associations with the Newport people was closer, but it wasn't, they recognized they were apart a little bit from the Newport people, but they had, very often as guests, very celebrated people and some of the people themselves, for instance, Henry James, the great novelist of that time, he came here to Newport. William James, his brother, the philosopher, I think he came to Newport. But those were way back in the at the turn of the century, about that time. There was a very famous actress that lived here. I forget her name. She lives, I think, down there on the corner of Rhode Island Avenue and Catherine Street.
Where did most of these winter people live? Was it in?
They lived pretty much in that general area of the K Street, Gibbs Avenue. We say between what's now the Boulevard and K Street, and up on the hill, all through that east section of Newport.
Yeah.
And a great many of those people were parishioners of Trinity Church.
Now, speaking of churches, where did you and your mother go to church when you were growing up? Where was
I went to St. Joseph's Church because I lived on Everett Street, which was in St. Joseph's Parish, and Everett Street is the second street north of Mann Avenue.
Oh.
St. Joseph's Church is now on the corner of Mann Avenue and Broadway.
Right.
And Everett Street was the second block north. That's where but when I was a boy, I lived right up on Central Street, or Central Court, which was a court in those days, which is just one block from the church, just back of the church.
Yeah.
So I didn't change my church association until after I was married. In fact, until I went to Middletown to live, and then I went to St. Mary's.
Now, when did you move to Everett Street? Was that after you were married?
Yeah, after I was married.
Well,
Yeah. I was married in 1924.
And
And I went to live on Everett Street, lived there first on one side of the street, and then when the family got too big for that house, moved across the street. So we lived on Everett Street until we went out to Paradise Avenue. Yeah.
Now, tell me about your wife. Whom did you marry?
She was Mary Walsh, and she was the oldest daughter of William W. Walsh, and she was one of 5 children, She had a sister, Margaret, who later married James Dwyer of Gustav J.S. White,
Oh.
and 3 brothers. 2 brothers were priests who lived in New York, were in the New York diocese. And the oldest brother was the successor of Walsh Brothers furniture store on Thames Street, which was the furniture store of Newport at that time.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other furniture store, but Titus's, but that was the big furniture store. And she and her sister had a little school for 2 or 3 years. That's before I went with her, went and courted her. But
How did you meet her? Had you known her growing up?
oh yes, I knew her. I knew them all growing up. I was more closely connected with her uncle's family, John Walsh. John Walsh and William Walsh were partners together in this furniture store, and I knew the other family better than I did her family, but I got to know her family. But I'd known them all along my life, but didn't become interested in her until I was through college.
We didn't cover all your education. We got you as far as through Rogers High School.
Yeah.
And then where did you go to college?
Rogers High School, I graduated in 1910. My people thought I was a little young to go to college, which is foolish. So I took what they called a postgraduate year, which they had in those days. So I went to Brown University in the fall of 1911 and graduated in 1915. And then I went on to Harvard Law School.
Oh. Now you had mentioned that your education was left in a trust from Mr. Peckam, the funds for your education. Had he gone to those? Did you go to the same colleges that Mr. Peckham had gone to, or had he gone to?
He never went to law school. In those days, the lawyers didn't have to go to law school.
I see.
But he went to Brown.
He
went to Brown University. Yeah. In those days, you could walk into Harvard. Today, I probably wouldn't be accepted for Harvard.
Oh, I wouldn't be so
Oh,
sure
no,
of
it's
that.
very hard, None of my boys, they didn't apply, but they thought it was foolish to apply because, Harvard today, I think they try to diversify their personnel, their enrollment, to make it as widespread as possible. They always say now that you have less chance of getting into Harvard from New England than you do from out west somewhere.
Probably.
Yeah.
I think they do try to distribute it geographically. So then you had been in practice. You'd been working for a few years before you were married. I mean, you'd been in practice.
Yeah. I ended practice, really I did my clerkship in the summer of 1918 and entered the firm, didn't enter the firm, but I was admitted to the bar in February 1919 and wasn't married till 1924, you see.
Well, tell me about your family, your children.
Well, there were 4 boys, and the oldest one was a girl. And I think they had a very happy childhood. They always had plenty of people to, plenty of playmates, and they got along well together. And They all went to public school. My daughter was a great Girl Scout. But none of my sons, funny thing, my daughter just loved the Girl Scouts and the organization. A couple of my boys tried the Boy Scouts, didn't like it. They didn't like being organized. They liked to do their own...
The individuals.
Their own things, yeah, that's right. We had a very nice little camp over at Third Beach where we went in the summer. We didn't use First Beach in those days.
Oh.
We went to Third Beach.
Mm-hmm. What was that like? What, was it where the Third Beach Club is now?
Third Beach, up until, 5 or 6 years ago, when they cleared all the buildings off Third Beach. Third Beach was a series of little cabins all around the edge of the beach. Mm-hmm. And the people owned those, and they rented them from St. George's School.
Oh.
At least up that section of the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Down by the end of Third Beach Road, where it comes in there was a section that I think belonged to I think the Van Burens had a place down there. Mm-hmm. But most of the beach frontage was owned by St. George's, and they rented out lots, and you put up your own house, the little shack. They were not fit for all year round. They're just, although people lived in them in the summer.
Oh, did they?
We didn't in ours, but people did live in some.
Were they similar to the little houses that are still there, or they probably were bigger if people lived in them? There's still a few of those little houses along the way. I think that are rented from the bird sanctuary.
I don't think there are any houses that people live in over there now.
They're more of...
Those are little, just cabanas.
Yeah, changing places.
Yeah, just change clothes, that's all. No, these were bigger than that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And that, of course, is still water over there. You don't get the waves. Very good for young children because there's no surf, there's no undertow, and it's a great place.
Does St. George still own that land there? Do you know?
No, I think what happened, I think the Audubon Society wanted to acquire that for protecting wildlife in the marsh over there, and I think St. George's either gave it or sold it to the Audubon Society. And then, unfortunately, the Audubon Society got into a hassle with the Middletown Council, Middletown government, and finally they got so disgusted they turned it over to the Interior Department of the United States government.
Oh.
And we thought we had an arrangement. Billy worked out a sort of a loose association of all the owners of these buildings over there to try to work out some sort of a self-policing arrangement that would permit them to retain their buildings there.
Yeah.
We had it all arranged in the legal department of the Interior Department. Turned it down. So then they insisted that all the buildings be raised. We had to have ours torn down. And now I think there's an arrangement between the department and the town to turn the beach back to the town.
Yes, I think they are.
Yeah.
They're,
also, there's a lot of negotiation for the statuesque point there. I think Middletown's going to take that over too.
I think there's some sort of a trade involved.
Yeah, trade. Yeah, that's right. You ever been out there?
Oh, it's
Statuesque?
wonderful.
Ned came over at my house late yesterday afternoon, and he said, "Boy, I've just been walking around Statuette Point. I think that's one of the most beautiful places on the island."
Oh, I
It's really nice. And he said now that the wildlife's beginning to come back there pretty much, and also, I guess, some of the wild bushes and so forth are beginning to.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, it got to be a dump, you know. People went over there and dumped
yes.
rubbish and everything
Yes.
else.
And then, of course, they had that terrible fire
Yes,
last year,
yes, that's right.
or early this spring, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a favorite place of ours.
Yeah, we had a very ordinary family, and a very, I think, a family that all got along well together. We had no antagonisms, you know. I see instances of it now of where there's a clash between the girl in her early 20s and the mother.
Mm.
They don't just get along together. The result was that the girl goes her way and establishes a residence, and maybe that's the best way. They get along fine then.
Mm.
But where they're living together under the same roof, that was never so in my group.
No.
The only time we left was they left when they got married.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a difference. There is that difference today. But you know it, you see it.
Yes, but it must have, certainly it's the changing times, I'm sure, but it also says something about you and your family, I think. I'm not sure, even those days that all families were close.
In these families, the parents, you know, do everything for the children, you know, but of course we had arguments. Every family does. Used to have some great arguments.
I'm sure some wonderful discussions.
Yeah, we used to have some great arguments at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd come home from the office, apparently a little bit on edge. And they'd say, "Give him something to eat right away. Give him something to eat, Ma. Give him something to eat. Calm him down."
You've had such a busy career, just not here in the office, but in the town and on all kinds of committees. And
Yeah.
Did you ever have any time for recreation too? I mean,
Oh, yes.
Did you?
Yeah, when we first, all of us were just starting in practice of law for maybe for 4 or 5 years, we had a city league here, and quite a few of us were on teams in the city league, played basketball during the winter. We had that. That was quite a league. Then we used to belong to the YMCA, play volleyball, and things of that sort. Oh, yeah. But most of my recreation has been, of course, I played tennis. I never was good at it. And I walked a great deal. And I like mountain climbing.
Oh.
I used to do a lot of that.
Where did you climb mountains?
Well, I climbed in New Hampshire and the Adirondacks and Vermont.
Oh. Now, did any members of your family go along with you, or?
Yeah, Ned, when he grew up and had his family, he used to, and when they were boys growing up, they went to Vermont with me, you know. But most of my mountain climbing, I did it. I didn't do it with my sons. I did it with friends of mine, my age, you know, me, even older sometimes, that like that too.
Did your wife ever go along? Did she like to do that?
Yeah, she wasn't much for mountain climbing. She, I took her up Mount Washington on, soon after we were married. We walked all the way up the carriage road.
Oh,
Can you
my.
imagine it? She was lame and used ointment for several days after that. She never cared much about mountain climbing. She walked with me. She played golf. She liked golf.
Mm-hmm. Did you play golf too?
No.
Oh. And where did she play golf?
She played over at a private golf course. It's right off Third Beach Road. It's all overgrown now. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yes. Actually, we can see it from our house.
Yes, I guess you can see, yeah.
Is it Statuous Way or something?
Yeah.
The road that...
Yeah, that's
goes
right.
by.
You went up
Yeah.
up in there. It's over in that section. It's not... Yeah, Statuous Way would run into it.
That's right.
That's right, it would.
Right. Huh.
And Third Beach Road, down at the end of the road, runs into the end of it. But there was a man named Peckam, no relation to my associate, but a man named Peckam that ran that as a private enterprise.
Oh. Now when did that cease to be?
Oh. I guess 20 years ago, I guess.
And now the
Reuben Peckam.
clubhouse is now a private home.
Yeah.
I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. What was it like on Everett Street when your family was growing up? Had it changed much? Most of the
Yeah, it
houses, I
hasn't
guess,
changed
were
very
there.
much. Everett Street, have always been very happy that my family grew up on Everett Street because of the cosmopolitan neighborhood. We had a Jewish family across the street from us. We had a Greek family further down. We had Irish American people like ourselves, and we had a Presbyterian church down at the foot of the street with the boys from that. And we had the St. Paul's Methodist parsonage right next door to us. And we had a basketball court in our yard, and sometimes we'd have 30 boys there playing from all over. And in addition to that, we weren't too far from West Broadway, and a lot of the black boys would come over. And I can always remember my daughter playing marbles. I don't know if you ever played marbles or not,
Yeah.
but she'd sit down on the curb with some of these black boys and droon them, as they say. That is, she'd get all the marbles,
Yeah,
you know.
right.
And I thought that, as I look back on it, that was great.
Yeah.
My kids never grew up with any prejudices, racial prejudices of any kind. For a while before it's warm enough to make the coffee.
This is Ann Damon for the Newport Historical Society. Today, on June 17, 1985, I'm having a second interview with Mr. Edward Corcoran. Mr. Corcoran, at the end of our last tape, we were talking about your neighborhood on Everett Street.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful, diverse place it was for your children to grow up. How about you and your wife? Was there much visiting too amongst the adults as well as the children in that neighborhood? Did you have good friends there?
No, not anything to speak of, except Mr. and Mrs. Lowe lived across the street. He was superintendent of schools, and Mrs. Lowe became very friendly with both me and Mrs. Corcoran, and she used to visit quite regularly. And of course, Bill Peckam lived up the street, and he'd come over, you know, 4th of July and Christmas time, but generally speaking, no, we were all very friendly, but we never went to each other's houses.
What made you decide to move to Middletown?
Well, Mrs. Corcoran's sister and her husband, Jim Dwyer, of Gustav J.S. White, they moved out there, quite a while before we did. We lived in a big house on Everett Street, and my wife had a slight heart attack, and Dr. Sullivan, our doctor, said that house was too big for her. She had to get out of it. So then her sister persuaded her to go out there on Paradise Avenue. And we went out there and lived for the first 5 years in the gatehouse of Mrs. Foote's estate until we built our own house. Well, that really was the reason for it. I was rather reluctant to leave Newport. I like Newport. But she was glad to be there next to her sister, and I like Middletown too.
I'm sure you do now.
Yes.
Yes, it's such a beautiful spot. I'd like to just touch on some of the periods of Newport history and have you tell me what you remember about that time. Can we start with World War I? And what was Newport like then?
Well, Newport, I don't think changed very much until after the Navy pulled out. I think Newport was much the same right down through the years until the Navy left, you know.
Right.
Population didn't change very much. The old businesses remained the old businesses, and there weren't many new establishments, as I recall it. The main business was done on Thames Street and Broadway. Bellevue Avenue didn't develop until after the Second World War. The shopping center up there. All the business was down here. And the population didn't change very much. I don't think there were many new people that came into town until later years.
During the war, were there any changes in town because of the war? There was increased activity, I suppose, at the torpedo station.
Oh yes, yes. That was a very busy place, and in fact, that continued a pretty busy place right down to the Second World War. They ran that ferry regularly, you know, every day, and there was a great many people employed over there.
And there were a lot of new Navy recruits, I'm sure, at the time of the First World War. Is that when the Navy really began to make its presence known in Newport?
The what?
Was that when the Navy really made its presence felt in Newport during the First World War? Did they have a lot of recruits here?
Yes, that's when I think that's when the training of recruits really built up during the First World War. There was we always had a lot of sailors in Newport, far back as I can remember, until they closed out the training. Then, of course, after the Second World War came the OCS, the officers' school.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't remember very. There's nothing that stands out in my mind about drastic changes in Newport during the First World War.
Were there many? Did you have many friends who went to war, who fought in the war?
Oh yes, well, practically all of them. You see, when the First World War broke out, I was in law school, and all my Newport friends were my close friends were in law school, and I tried to get into the service, and at that time they were pretty choosy. Second World War they weren't. There was a saying that if you were warm, they'd take you in the Second World War. But I was at law school and was using my eyes a great deal, and I had astigmatism in my right eye, and they rejected me.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And I tried to get into the Navy, and I tried also to get into the Army, and I was rejected for both. But all my friends went into the service, and most of them went to officers' school up in Plattsburgh, New York, and eventually all went over in service. Bill Peckam, Bill Sheffield, Russ Hare, John Nolan, Bill McLeod. All my close friends were in the service. And at law school, there were only the cripples that were left, in the last year in law school. Yeah, like me, yeah. I didn't consider myself a cripple, but, they wouldn't take me. They finally took me for limited service, guarding places in the United States. And I was very glad that the war ended, so I didn't have to do that. But I went into the last, in 1918, through John Green, a friend of mine who was the secretary for Congressman O'Shaughnessy. He got me a job with the State War and Navy Department in Washington. So I was down there for the last year of the war. And that was the year of the great, that was the thing that stands out about about Newport and the country, was the polio epidemic. Oh, that was, they didn't have any vaccine or anything in those days,
1918, 1919?
1918, 1919, yeah.
And Newport was hard hit?
Yeah, oh yes. What's that? Let's see, that was... No, I beg your pardon. Not the polio. That came much later. The big flu.
Oh, yes.
That was the worst flu epidemic the country ever had, and they didn't have the scientific discoveries to combat the flu, and a lot of people died here. I was in Washington at the time. All the public places were completely closed down. The public buildings, the theaters, and everything was closed down because of the epidemic, and it was very, very, very contagious too. And that was the the thing that really stands out about the war period.
For how long a period was that, where things closed down like that?
Well, I was there. The worst of it lasted about a year. I don't know what it was like up here because I was down there, but I know that it was much the same here. I think that everything was pretty well closed down.
Were you back in Newport by the time of Admiral Sims' homecoming parade?
Oh yes, yes.
Could you tell me about that?
I don't remember it very well. I saw there was something about it in the papers the other day, I think, about and of course this was the Savings Bank book shows that too.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite a friend of Admiral Sims. We had a long campaign that extended over a number of years to try to get the city manager form of government in Newport.
Oh.
It was then a bipartisan form of government, and the politicians fought it very, very, both here and upstate. They fought it very hard. And Admiral Sims was a very active person in the campaign, and I worked with him and with others in the campaign. And we eventually got it. But it took several years. He was a very nice man.
He was from Newport originally?
Yeah, that was the time when, that's about, well, he gave my oldest boy, Ned, a little silver cup. So that must have been about 1926, 1927, back in the, I don't know exactly when he came back to Newport. It must have been that area, a little before that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, he was from Newport originally?
Sims?
Uh-huh.
No.
No,
I don't know where he's from. And Mrs. Sims was a very public-spirited woman, and very active in municipal projects, not the political side, but now, for instance, one of the great things that she worked on was the getting the money for the stone tower out there at Montgomery Park. She was one of the instigators of that, I think, and worked very hard for it. And that was a pretty successful project. Had a lovely park there, which later the Vandals did a lot to destroy, but it's still a nice park. Have you been out there at all?
Yes, and I hope they're cleaning it up a bit.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to.
Yeah.
It got very run
You
down.
can't go up into the tower anymore.
No.
You used to be able to do that. They had to close that all up. The boys got up and pushed the capstones on the railings off, broke them down on the ground off. Things they do.
I saw that article in the paper too recently about the parade for Admiral Sims. It said it was the biggest in Newport's history or something.
Yes.
Do you remember?
That's so.
Remember where it went?
Well, I don't remember where it went, but the parades always followed about the same route. It would form probably go out form out of Broadway and go down Thames Street and then up to Bellevue Avenue and then back along Bellevue Avenue, or else in reverse of that, you know. And in those days, they were all military parades because there were so many seamen here, so many sailors, that they could, you know, turn out maybe 2,000 or 3,000 boys marching, and then they had the local people in it too. They had some army over at Port Adams, and they had the Marines at the torpedo station. So they really could put on quite a show. Yeah. But one great civilian parade I remember was must have been around 1908 when Teddy Roosevelt ran independence, you know. Mm-hmm. They had a torchlight parade at night, and I remember they had I would almost civilian organizations of parades. There may have been some military, but I remember particularly, excuse me, I remember particularly that the Outlet Company, which was a big department store in Providence, had an organization of their employees. They were all in uniform, and they carried torches that were lit. I always remember that. I saw it up on K Street. And that stuck in my mind, the lighted torches, you know, all the lighted torches.
Mighty funny.
Mm.
You mentioned the Fall River line the other day, people coming and going on it. Did you know any people, did you ever go on the Fall River line yourself?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I went with my, well, as a boy, I think the first time I went to New York was by the Fall River line, and I think I must have been about my last year in high school. We didn't travel very far in those days from home. And I went down on a New York boat, landed in New York at about 8 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then later on, a friend of mine, Vincent Grace, that would be in the 20s, I went down with him. He was married to a girl in New York. I went down with him on the Fall River line. But then people used to go up to Fall River, take the train up to Fall River, and ride down on the boat to Newport. Made a lovely sail, you know, from 7 o'clock in the evening on a summer's day. A lot of people did that, although they didn't go to New York.
Well, the boats must have been very impressive.
Oh, yes.
Were they well equipped and
Yeah.
outfitted?
Yeah, that's right. They were really more like floating hotels, you know. Did that book show any of the interiors of the dining room of the Priscilla? Or?
I'm not sure.
They were really very nice. There's one of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These are big boats.
What is the size of them?
Mm. That's the Commonwealth. That was the last one they built. That had the dining room on the upper deck. The other boats had the dining room down below on the first deck or second deck. Yeah, there's quite a bit on the Fall River line in this book.
Was it more the Depression, do you think, that caused the end of the Fall River line?
No, I understand what really caused the end of it was that the New Haven Railroad apparently got control of the line, and they found that they could ship their freight to greater advantage by rail than by boat. And then the fire laws came into effect, and they claimed that these boats were too much of a fire hazard. They're all wooden.
There have been some fires on them, haven't there?
Yes, I think so. I don't think that there was one boat, must have been when I was a small boy, that was burned.
Mm-hmm.
But none were during my memory. The big boats, the really fine ones, were not destroyed, not damaged at all. The Plymouth, the Priscilla, the Puritan, the Commonwealth, those were 4 big boats.
Now, after they closed down, what happened? Was there any change in the Long Wharf and
No.
Washington Street areas from what happened to all those places that used to, there weren't there shops along there that repair shops and that sort of thing for the ships when they came to Newport?
No, those places eventually closed down, and they were vacant for years.
Were they?
Yeah. And that was quite an industry. There were a great many men employed by the boats.
Yeah.
Painters, carpenters, freight handlers. And that was quite a blow to Newport when they took that line away. And nothing took its place.
Those were hard times for Newport, in a way, weren't they? The economy was certainly not as strong as it is today, would you say?
Oh, no.
How about the Depression in Newport?
I was thinking about that the other day. I don't think Newport, of course, every place was hit. I know the banks were badly hit in Newport because they had mortgages on a great many places in Newport, which the mortgages had never been, the principal had never been paid, and the people couldn't come up with the money to pay the interest, and they were foreclosed. So there's no doubt about it that the Depression did cause a lot of loss of property. But I don't visualize Newport as having a lot of people in bread lines or anything of that sort. You know, I don't think the people were all in their own homes, most of them, and they probably had a curtail, there's no doubt about it. We all had a curtail in what we spent. But I don't think there was any real severe hardship, really, as there was in other places.
Yeah.
That was partly due to the fact we had no industry. It didn't affect the Navy very much.
Mm-hmm. That was probably one of the reasons why Newport
survived it well, yes.
It did have the Navy there.
That's right. And also the summer people curtailed, but I don't think that they really changed their mode of life very much during that time. Although some of them, I imagine, were very hard hit.
Of course, around the same period, too, came Prohibition in 1933.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you say that affected Newport? How did the Newporters feel about it?
I know during Prohibition, we had all sorts of liquor brought into Newport, some of it poisonous and some of it not, but they had people, and some of our respected citizens went into that business. They used to bring the liquor up from Florida. They brought it in by boat from Florida to Florida, I guess. And I had a friend that used to drive the cars up, a car up, with a supply of liquor. And they had concealed below the floor of the car. He told me that there was one place along the route that there was a hole dug in the ground off the route, and when he stopped there, he took out a case and put it in the hole, and he went right on his way. He knew he was all right in that particular section. And then then they knew about taking side roads that would avoid the main route. They had all sorts of ways of rum running, and that was quite a business.
I'm sure. And how about by sea? There must have been quite a bit coming in by boat too around here, wasn't there?
Well, when it came in by boat, it would never come in, to this harbor. Mm-hmm. We have such a coastline here. They go into little coves and so forth. And there was quite a little liquor brought in over at Black Point Palm, which is on the Secundit River. Places like that. They wouldn't come to an ordinary port because, there are too many people around that could report them. But that was... I can remember that we used to make our own gin. Bathtub gin, yeah.
How was it?
Wasn't very good. But it filled the bill. Yeah, that was quite a time.
So would you generally say that was an unpopular amendment, especially in Newport?
Sure you was.
It really didn't.
It was unpopular throughout the country.
Yes. Were there any speakeasies in town?
Yes. There were places where you could go and get, not so much hard liquor, I think places you could go and get beer. Mm-hmm. But there were places.
Where were they? In particular, any place in particular? Or?
Well, there's one place up on State Street. What was her name? She was a nice woman too, a nice family, but they ran this little hotel and bar room there, and people that knew her could go there and get liquor. And of course, that was the red light district up there too. Two houses up there. Yeah. That was State Street. Later it was called Liberty Street.
Oh. I know.
That's right back at Bellevue Avenue.
Yes. Well, one of the next thing on my list is Hurricane in 1938. I'm sure you have some vivid memories of that.
Yeah. In 1938, Newport was in a lawsuit in which they had condemned the Newport Waterworks Corporation property, the entire water system on the island. And the Newport Water Corporation, privately owned largely by the Norman family, opposed it. And we had about 3 or 4 years of litigation on that. And I can remember we were in the courthouse up on, not the new courthouse, the old courthouse up on Washington Square, the head of the park. And I can remember at lunchtime,
All right.
a committee was formed, a breakers committee, and I was on that committee more or less as the representative of Countess of Cheney, but the Countess used to come there sometimes herself, but when she was not there. And the function of the committee was to make sure that anything that was done was she knew about, and that it was submitted to her for her approval. And so I did have quite a little to do with the breakers, but not with any of the others. Other buildings. She was a very nice woman. Very, very averse to any publicity for herself or for the buildings and so forth. She was a rather short woman, dressed very, very quietly. I tell a story about her going into the tennis, the breakers. She had the tickets that I counted to Cheney's box. And the man looked and said, you have a right to go to Countess Cheney's box? She said, I'm Countess Cheney. You know, she's that type of person, you know. You think people would know that she's always in the background, very, very quiet, very real lady. Countess of Paradise still lives, I think, on the 3rd floor of the breakers.
I think so.
She's the daughter.
She has an apartment.
Yeah. She's nice. She's very regular, she said. She's been championing the cause of Mrs. O'Connor, who runs a linen shop there in the corner of, at the entrance to the casino.
Mm-hmm.
There's an out-of-town group now, wealthy people that have spent a lot of money in the casino and fixed up that court tennis building and so forth. Mm-hmm. And they gave Mrs. O'Connor notice to quit.
Oh, really? Was that recently?
Yeah, about a year ago, I guess. And Countess of Paradise was really up in arms. And she went to them and she laid down the law to them and so forth. But so they finally capitulated. They had another outfit they wanted to put in there. They finally capitulated and prepared a lease, which is pretty a pretty tough lease, and Mrs. O'Connor is sort of hesitant to sign it, I guess, but I guess she's going to. But I remember talking to Countess Perry at the tennis last year, and she had boxed right across from ours, and boy, she really was fiery mad at them, you know, for trying to do that. She said, they're going to put in something to sell these tennis shirts. We don't want anything like that up there. So I think her say-so had
that's good.
some weight.
Right. I
It's a
know
lovely shop.
I know Mrs. O'Connor. I've
Yeah.
been friends with her.
Oh yeah, Mina. Mina.
And she's been there for quite some time, I'm sure, hasn't she?
Oh yes,
Yes.
yes.
Now, does the Hall of Fame then owns all owns all the shops in that building? In that central building, do they control most of those shops?
I don't know what. No, I don't. No, they can't. You know, the Hall of Fame is something fairly new. Those buildings have been there a long time, and I think that this out of town group has control of those things now. You see, all those stores, where the bank is, and where the liquor store is, and the forge there. I think they're all controlled by the tennis association, whatever it is. Ed could tell you more about that because he was in that for a while.
He was on the board for a long time, wasn't he?
Huh?
He was on the board for a long
Yes,
time.
yes, he was. But there again, they didn't, you know, when he came up for election, they didn't elect him. They put in their own people.
Yeah.
Of course, those were the people that were spending the money, so they felt they had a right to make the decision, I guess.
There's a lot of feeling amongst the members about that. I know.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
I hope they're this year things seem to be running better.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope they'll stay
Yeah.
that way.
I was surprised they rent out the Horseshoe Piazza now for affairs.
Yes. Weddings.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. The man who owns the LaForge, his daughter was married. He had a big reception there on the Horseshoe Piazza.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to a wedding Saturday. A girl that used to work in this office, she's being married and going to have her reception at the Horseshoe Piazza.
Oh, that's a lovely place.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful spot.
Mm.
I love that building.
The whole atmosphere
Yeah.
up there. It's really the people. The tennis players love to come there.
Uh-huh.
They don't have that setting anywhere that they go. You know, they really enjoy it in Newport.
The wonderful detail, the shingle work and everything.
Yes.
It's just
Yeah.
so beautiful.
The old clock.
Mm-hmm.
It's been there for years.
Yeah. And works.
Yeah, that's right.
So you must remember quite a few tournaments there too.
I surely
Here.
do. Morris McLaughlin came from California about 1910, 1912, and he revolutionized the game of tennis. He came from the West Coast, and apparently they played it that way. He came to the net. He served and then came to the net. In the old days, they never did that. It was a backcourt game. Larned, who was champion for many years, he practically never came to the net. I never saw Larned, but I did see all the big ones from McLaughlin down. Williams, who came from Philadelphia, eventually beat Larned, beat McLaughlin in 1915. Little fellow named Johnson was a great player. Parker was a great player with the backhand. He had a great backhand. Then, of course, Tilden came along, Doig, Budge. The great Frenchmen were here, Lacoste, and his two men played with him. What were they? The great Australians came here, Crawford. And I saw all those people. They didn't have Van Allen's method of scoring either.
No.
I remember seeing a doubles match over on the Peabody side of the grounds there. They had tennis courts along the Peabody Street fence.
Right.
I remember seeing a match there that I think lasted something like 3 or 4 hours, and the score was something like McLaughlin and Bundy, I think. I'm not sure about that. But it went on and on, you know, deuce. Went on for about 4 hours.
They didn't have tiebreakers in those days.
No, oh no.
Yeah. Did you play tennis there yourself?
No. Oh, I played at it, you know, but I never was any good.
Well, I know you certainly to have a whole wonderful tennis playing family.
Oh, they all played pretty well. But I never.
Children?
I never did much at it. My daughter was city champion, and my granddaughter was city champion. Marty's city champion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen Marty play. She's terrific.
Yeah, when she was a little girl, it was at the time when the women's tournaments first started in Newport, and there was a French girl that played. Now, what was her name? She got into the finals. She played in the finals of one tournament against a girl from Australia, and that girl later played with the Boston, what do they call those? That Boston.
Oh, the Lobsters.
The Lobsters, I think.
Was it Yvonne Gulickon? Or
No, for her.
Oh.
This girl was, what was her name? But anyhow, the French girl, they had some of the young Newport little children come up there to play, and she picked out Marty and told her parents that they ought to see that she got proper instruction, that she had. And they had a picture in the paper playing her about the tennis. She's always a little bit of a thing.
Wow. So you were all very proud of her.
She's a nice kid. She never got a swelled head. She's very. Her mother, I guess, gets more concerned, I think, about whether she wins or not. Take it in stride. When did you start playing?
I played a bit growing up, but I really didn't play seriously till I was 30, I guess.
Oh, is that so?
The children had all, babies had grown up.
Yes.
I wish I had played them.
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty much true of the group you play with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they played so much as girls, did they?
No.
They've taken it up as sort of a hobby, now.
Right.
Yeah. It's nice. Very nice.
Story. Just to change the subject for a moment, you mentioned something about the waterworks and working on that some litigation
Mm-hmm.
for that at the time of the hurricane. How did that turn out?
The city won.
Did it?
Yeah, it went. It was just a case of they got over the first technical hurdle as to whether they had a right to condemn, and the court said yes, they did have a right to condemn. Then it was just a question of valuation, and we had all sorts of people valuing the land and the different assets of the corporation. They had their own people, and then they had a commission that decided what the valuation should be. It wasn't decided by the court, it was decided by a committee. And the committee about split the difference after about 3 years. They split the difference, and the city paid whatever the award was. Now there's talk, of maybe would be to the advantage of the city to turn it back to a private corporation to operate. I don't agree. I think the city ought to still operate it. But that was a long litigation.
Certainly seen some tremendous changes here in Newport in the last, say, dozen years from the way I guess basically it pretty much stayed the same throughout your lifetime, didn't it?
It did. It didn't change very much. The Bellevue Avenue was the first big change. Mm-hmm. The Bellevue Avenue was always where the casino is and the other buildings there on that side of the street, that was always a very nice shopping center. Mm-hmm. But what caused a lot of business to go up to Bellevue Avenue, new business, was the lacking of parking facilities on Thames Street.
Oh.
So then the stores went up there, and they developed the shopping center, and then it became so congested up there that they began to come down here again,
Now, when that Almac shopping center was built, was the James Gordon Bennett's house still there, across the street from the casino?
Yeah.
Or had that been torn down? That was torn down.
That was owned by a White House family after James Gordon Bennett. Mm-hmm. And the house set back on a big grounds there. You see where the parking lot is, and had the wall is still there, and they had two little towers at the entrance with iron owls. And those owls, their eyes lit up at night.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. And that was there until they bought it for the shopping center. The White House has died off, and they sold it, and the shopping center was made.
How did you feel about that? Were you sorry to see the big house go?
Yes. But the general sentiment of the town was in favor of it. I think they realized the congestion of Thames Street. All the business people realized that there had to be a change, and I think some of them welcomed it. There wasn't too much opposition to that.
I imagine you've probably been involved personally in some of the real estate transactions that have been going on in recent years, some of the new buildings and businesses there.
I didn't have anything to do with that up there at the shopping center. this office for a long time was involved, and still are, more involved in the development of Middletown. We were attorneys for Middletown for years, this office. And of course, Ned's been on the council, and I was on the moderator out there. But I was on the school committee here in Newport for 16 years.
Oh.
So I was greatly involved in the new high school when that was built.
Mm-hmm.
And I also was on the board of review here in Newport. And in the Chamber of Commerce. So my activities pretty much involve Newport.
When was the high school built?
Okay. I don't know what year.
But it was while you were still living here in Newport then? So
Yeah.
it wasn't more than 40
Yeah,
years ago.
it's about more than 40 years ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was on the school committee when it was built.
Did that take a lot of doing to get that organized? And where had the old high school?
The old high school was on Broadway, where the junior high is now. The
Oh, I
Thompson
see.
Junior High is right next to the city hall.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a good deal of feeling on that, because the school committee wanted to put the high school up around where St. Michael's is now, or in that area. And the town and the people that lived in the area raised such an objection to it. They didn't want it. They said it would be noisy and traffic and everything, and they finally forced us to pick that place down there, which we never wanted to do, too far out of the way, you know.
Yeah.
But there was kind of a lot of feeling at that time, for and against. The school committee had hearings which people come in and protest, and the committee itself reacted, myself included. We felt the people were very selfish and looking out for their own interests, and never forgot that they ever were children themselves, never went to school, and all that business. But I still think too bad wasn't put where it should have been. The city could have bought Bushy Park, which is on the other side of the boulevard, right opposite the end of, right opposite St. Michael's.
Oh, yeah.
That whole area there was a man that lived there, I forget his name, but he had a house and had the whole block there from Annandale Road down to Cliff Avenue.
Oh.
And that could have been bought at one time for $25,000.
My goodness.
And John Nicholas Brown's mother was a member of the school committee. And she said we should try to get the council to buy that land, because someday it would be a good place for the school. But you know, a town government is always living in the present. They don't think about the future. They think how much money they've got to spend today and whether they need it and need to spend it and so forth. So they never did it. And that would have been a good place for it. But they never bought it, and then it was sold to somebody else. But
It would have saved a lot on busing
yes,
fees, too.
yes, that's right.
Very few people can walk to Rogers, where it is now.
Bill lives right down near there.
I know he does.
Yeah,
Yes, that's a
right.
beautiful, beautiful section.
Yeah, that's a nice spot.
Newport.
Mm.
And that's being quite a few new houses going up around that area.
Yes, yeah. Mm.
But it hasn't been overbuilt like the other end of Ocean Drive. There's a lot
No.
of,
Well, I think it's pretty bad where the Edge Hill alcoholic place is, and
Yeah.
across the street from that, I think
Bonnycrest.
Bonnycrest and all through that
Yeah.
section's bad. You know, they've crowded the buildings in
they
there
have, yeah.
too much. The property that the sculptor sold to them, you know,
Oh, yeah, Brenton Cove.
Brenton Cove, yeah, that's badly crowded.
Well, have they done anything to change the zoning out that way?
Yes,
Since those things
they
have gone up?
well, not since those buildings, no. But they do have a zoning law now that I think that only one building on 80,000 square feet over in that area.
Oh, that's good.
And so
Yeah.
that's a pretty Hammersmith Farm. I was involved in the sale of that.
Were you?
Yeah. They had Mr. Auchincloss needed to sell that. I mean, he in one of the recessions, his firm lost a lot of money, and he was the only one with money, and he had to pay the bill, so that he really couldn't afford to keep up the whole property, and he tried to sell it, and there were various. At one time, the state of Rhode Island was considering buying it for a state park.
Oh.
And if the governor had been a little bit sympathetic, probably it would have been bought.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad it wasn't, because I think now it's being retained for its original state. It's very nice. But finally, Mr. Auchincloss, they sold off one lot. They sold off the Point lot. But then they gave the main house and some of the land to an agent in New York to sell. And they put an advertisement in the Providence Journal, Wall Street Journal. It was only about an inch or two. Mm-hmm. And there was a man down in he was really a Massachusetts man, but he sold a big place down in Florida, and he was looking for an investment. He happened to buy the Wall Street Journal and saw that, and came up and bought the place. And this company had said they'd write a brochure and circulate the brochure around, but before they do that, the Auchincloss had to pay $10,000 for advertising. Mm-hmm. So they agreed to do that. And then the brochure, I guess, was never written. and the little ad that they put in the paper sold the property, and they got a 10% commission on the sale of the property. I always thought that was pretty ironic, pretty bad.
Now, so just one man bought?
That's one man, yeah.
But don't they call it?
Well, then he formed an organization. He had took in some partners, and they formed a corporation.
The Camelot.
Yeah, Camelot Gardens. And then he died.
Oh.
He died of a heart attack. But two of his associates bought out the other two. I think there were 5 of them in it. And those two are now carrying it on. And they're doing a beautiful job. They've extended the gardens and keep up the place nicely, and they've sold only one lot off. There's a very nice house built out there in Ridge Road, you know, just where it turns. That was part of the King lot. They sold that. And of course, Mrs. Auchincloss still owns the castle, the yellow building. That's the old, not the original farmhouse, but that has been in existence for a long time. And then she built the windmill, or Mr. Auchincloss built the windmill. And they still own the windmill and the castle. But the rest of it's owned by Camelot Gardens.
And I had heard just recently there's a chance that it might be up for sale again. No? Well, that's good.
No, I don't think so.
Beautiful piece of property.
No, they're doing very well over there. I was talking with Mr. Ferrier the other day. He said they had a good year last year, and they're way ahead of last year already this year.
Good.
So I don't think there's any sense.
Well, it's good. I like to see. It's wonderful to see a place stay intact like that.
Yes.
Originally, didn't they have some plans to condominiumize that? Did I see some before they decided to sell off a lot to make it into a museum?
No, the Auchincloss
one group
didn't want to develop that way. They but maybe you're thinking about the place next door, the place just west of the Hammersmith is not built on at all now. That was owned by Manus and Mrs. James Casey, Ann Casey, who just died, as a matter of fact. And one of them was a Gamble, I think, and the other one was a Gambrel. Both wealthy people. And they had a dispute about the boundary line, and so they had their differences. So the Caseys took one part of the property, and the Manuses took the other part. And that the Caseys live out there in the summer. They have a house on there. It was an original house, but the Manuses are just holding that land. And there was at one time talk before the Manuses bought it that it was going to be developed into sort of a cluster condominium development. But the group that were going to do it couldn't finance it, or couldn't get the commitments for the tenants that would come in, and so they lost the property. It was sold at auction, and a group that Mr. Auchincloss formed to protect the property bought it, and then sold most of it off to these people. So I don't think there's any danger of that being developed for quite a while.
You're talking about development in Middletown. Are we going to be able to stem some of the development out there?
Well, I don't know. They did pass that temporary, moratorium on it. I don't know whether. I hope so. But there again, there's a place on the West Main Road out by I guess it's by Elephant Lane, owned by an old Portuguese farmer. He's just sold it for development. And at the end of Paradise Avenue, when you go up Berkeley Avenue,
Yes.
you know, you go up to the fire station, that road, you know, that beautiful tract of land on the left on the corner of Green End and Berkeley.
Right
That's,
next to
that's
Whitehall.
owned by a man named Corey. He's just sold it for development.
Yeah.
Too bad, you know. You can't blame him. He's getting along in years. He no longer farms it, and it's a big expense to him, and taxes and everything. You can't blame him, but I hate to see the country go like that. There won't be any open spaces after a while.
And that's what's so special about Middletown, its rural
Yeah.
character.
Right.
That particular tract is right next to Whitehall.
Yeah,
And
right
we're
next to
very
Whitehall.
concerned
That's
with,
right. That's going to be cluster dwellings, I
yeah.
think.
Which is not bad in a
No.
way.
Much better than buildings in a row,
Yes.
You know, do you notice those buildings over on the south side of Green End Avenue?
Yes.
They're all alike. They're ugly
are.
buildings.
They really are.
Yeah, awful.
Everything went up fast.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's a danger, especially when all these big farms begin to break up.
Yeah, that's right. There are not many left.
No.
Not many. When I was a boy, when I first started in this office, we represented the town of Portsmouth. I'd have to go out to the town hall, and we also went out there to examine titles for real estate. Took a trolley car, the Fall River trolley.
Oh.
That's the only way to get out there unless you had, an automobile. Those days it didn't have any automobile. And you'd go out, and it was always built up along the road. The houses were along the road, but back of that, all farms. Fortunately, we have the nursery business here.
Yes.
And Mr. Vanasek is constantly buying more land for nursery stock. That keeps the land nice and open.
Good. Yeah.
It's beautiful. But there's Kempenaar that have the nurseries. They're practically selling those off, house lots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not too bad.
Around us, we like to see we're hoping that the vineyards would.
Yeah, quite the right.
Well, throughout the island. Actually.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that would be a wonderful industry for us.
Yeah, that's right.
The climate is right.
Yeah.
So maybe
It's good climate for it.
Yeah.
Mm.
So maybe more people will be interested in that. But there is one right there near you. Greg Craig is just about, I guess, going to go on the market.
I don't know what's going to happen to Great Creek.
I think they want to sell it as one parcel. So I understand.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Oh, I don't know. Be nice if they could. But I understand the main house needs a great deal of repairs. That's one reason they moved Mrs. Van Buren to the house on Paradise Avenue,
Yeah.
I can remember when the old people lived there. I knew Miss Sylvia, who was the superintendent. They didn't object to our going up there and walking through the place, you know. You could walk in that place for a couple of hours. Everything's beautifully groomed, you know, paths and flowers and greenhouse all filled with plants and nectarines and plums and all sorts of things. Now, you know, you go up there, everything almost abandoned, you know. Too bad. But they shut down the greenhouse. Their bill for heating was something like $2,000 a month, they say, you know. They couldn't go on with that. So, I understand that someone told me the other day that Park Bernay is going to bring back the stuff and sell it there. Did you hear that?
Yeah. Sotheby's Park Bernay.
Oh, it's Sotheby, yeah.
Well, I think it's the same outfit.
Yeah.
And yes, they're going to have an auction there, and some of the proceeds are going to go to Trinity Church.
Oh, are they? Yeah.
For the preview party.
They need the money in Trinity. They started that renovation, you know.
Have they started the reservation?
Yeah, I think they have. I think they started the first phase. But Mike was hoping that Gustav White would get that auction. He figured that they could sell it here to greater advantage than New York. But the powers that be gave it to the New York people. Now they're going to bring it back here for sale.
I don't know if they'll bring it all back. I guess because
no, some of it they won't.
They probably have ties in both places.
Yeah,
yeah. But maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting.
Yeah. Mike had a pretty good auction on the fair home on this is Robert Young's place.
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah.
How did he get into the auction business?
So his uncle. His uncle did some auctioneering and also had another man who I think he wasn't well or something, and Jim Dwyer got Mike to go along with him. He learned it from his uncle. And then when the other man died, when Mike took over.
Yeah, certainly is wonderful at it.
Well, I always say that comes natural to him because he always wanted to be a circus man, and now he's putting up tents, and he's like a sideshow barker.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Doing what he wants.
He worked very hard.
Yeah. Now he lives with you, doesn't he? Uh-huh. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I've had him for... He should be taking care of me, and I'm taking care of him. I've had him for 18 years. But he's all right. The only thing, he'd drive a woman crazy, a housewife, because he's so irregular about his meals, you know. Pretty good about calling up, but usually I've got the stuff started when he calls. Well, I won't be home tonight. You got the thing done? Oh, all right, all right. But, you know, he travels a great deal. He goes all over New England, and he can't always be home.
Yeah. Quite a guy. So is all your family. I enjoy them all so much.
Thank you.
Your sons.
They're all different.
Met your daughter and your other son. But, a great group. I'm sure you must have some wonderful times when you all get together.
Yeah. stories over and over again. They've all got pretty good senses of humor, I'll say that.
Really do.
They get a lot of fun out of each other. Needling each other. That's one thing you want to be careful about, Michael. Never expose yourself to any comments by Michael at the auctions, because he had a great habit of picking somebody out, putting the finger right on. Well, you think that this would be good for you, wouldn't it? You're just starting in. Wouldn't this be a good thing for you to buy for the kitchen or something, you know?
Yeah.
Makes the person feel a little bit conspicuous.
I believe that.
Well, I don't think I've helped very much,
I
you
think
know.
you have helped
And, you know,
tremendously. I'm trying to think of some more questions. I think we've covered a large area.
Yeah.
Unless you can think of anything that I haven't asked you that you think might be of interest. I'll probably think of all kinds of things when I get home.
I think that the present city is which is a good thing. I think that there's a mingling of people, and the line is no longer drawn on religion or race or anything else. Very little. In the old days, Newport was pretty much pigeonholed with people in different classes and so forth. Religion too was great, fenced up between the Catholics and the Protestants. One was just as biased as the other, you know. You shouldn't ever attend a Protestant service. And in the schools, it wasn't true in the public schools. I don't think there was any difference in that. But in the Catholic schools, there's a difference between the kids that, the Catholic Catholic Sunday schools. Big difference between the kids that went to the public schools, kids that went to the private schools, the Catholic schools, and as I look back as a child, I had a great many Protestant friends. I went to a school in which I think maybe I was the only Catholic. So I grew up with very little of that bias, call it. But there was that feeling, you know. You were a little bit the other side of the fence. And that's all gone now. I think that's a very good thing. We're all going the same way. We all should be very united because of the evil in the world today. What's the latest news on this hijacking? Have they let them off?
I haven't heard.
I heard up at the Creamery that they had, I think that they'd released them.
They've released them, but they've taken them someplace else.
Oh, have they? Oh, I see.
That's what I got.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, I think your last comment on Newport is probably a good note.
I think it is.
To end on, too.
Yeah,
and,
I think it is.
I'm sure I may think of other questions to ask you, but at least for now I'd like to thank you very much for the Historical Society, and we're really indebted to you. And very generous with your time.
You can pick enough out of it, to be worthwhile, but
course.
a lot of it, doesn't matter. But I think...
we appreciate it very much.
What do they do
Thank
now?
you.
What do you...
For the Newport Historical Society. Today, on June 10th, 1985, I'm interviewing Mr. Edward J. Corcoran for our oral history project. Mr. Corcoran, let's start with some facts about your own life. Let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
But came to Newport when my father died when I was about 4 years old. I came back to Newport. My mother was a Newport woman. And I lived in Newport till about 40 years ago when I moved to Middletown.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me something about your parents. How did, first of all, who were your parents? What was your mother's name?
My mother's name, she always went by the name of Annie J. Corcoran. Her real Christian name was Honora. Apparently she didn't like it. She always called it Annie. My father's name was Edward James Corcoran. He was an Edward J., but his middle name was James. Mine's John.
Oh.
He was born I think in Lawrence, Massachusetts. My mother was born in Nagorny, Michigan. But it just happened that her father was working out there at that time because he was really a Newport man.
I see. How did they meet each other then? Had your father's family moved to Newport?
I don't know that, no.
And what was he doing in Fall River, your father, when you were born?
He had a jewelry store in Fall River, jewelry and silver, and he was an engraver as well as a jewelry salesman.
Mm-hmm.
His father, he came naturally by it because his father was an engraver for the designs in the textile mills, in those days. He worked for a long while, I don't know where, but in Massachusetts somewhere in the textile industry. I know very little about because I'm too young, about my life in Fall River.
Mm-hmm.
But after my father died, my mother's sister lived in Newport, and she came and lived with my sister,
mm-hmm.
who worked for a lawyer by the name of Francis B. Peckam. And Francis B. Peckam invited my mother to come and live with her sister in his house.
Oh.
So that I lived in his house until I moved out to Middletown.
Oh, I see. And did your mother work in some way for Mr. Peckam?
No, she never worked for Mr. Peckam. She was more or less of a practical nurse. Mm-hmm. And she worked off and on at that, I know at the end of the Spanish-American War, an interesting thing, they had a little hospital off Wellington Avenue in Newport.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a nurse named Miss Tuck, Adeline Tuck, who I think was head of the hospital, and they brought all of the soldiers back in this area
mm-hmm.
who were suffering from typhoid. There were more killed in typhoid in the Spanish-American War than through combat, but a lot of the soldiers became ill with it, and they were brought back here. And my mother worked over there for a while, nursing the soldiers. And I think after that she went off once in a while on private cases, but for the most part she didn't work during my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't very well herself. She didn't enjoy good health, and she died when she was 64 years old.
But Mr. Peckam, did he have a family of his own?
No, Mr. Peckam. Mr. Peckam was married, and his wife died shortly before I came to live there. And he had no children.
Where did he live? Where was his home?
9 Central Street in Newport. He was one of the ablest lawyers in the state of Rhode Island, I guess. He was invited 2 or 3 times to be appointed to the Rhode Island Supreme Court, but he declined.
Oh.
He didn't care for it. He was a contemporary of the old Mr. Sheffield, William Payne Sheffield. And they were both very good lawyers. At that time, there weren't very many lawyers in Newport. Today, there are almost 100, I think.
And still some Sheffields and as lawyers and...
Yeah. So...
Now, your firm has Peckam in the name. Is that same Mr. Peckam?
Yeah. No, that isn't the same Mr. Peckam in the firm name.
Oh.
Mr. Peckam was a practiced law by himself, and then invited a young lawyer, Clark Burdick, when he graduated from law school, to come and be associated with him. There was never a firm, but he worked for Mr. Burdick, for Mr. Peckam. Then after Mr. Peckam died, Mr. Burdick took in Mr. William McLeod, who was a Newport man, young lawyer, and the firm became Burdick and McLeod. Then William A. Peckam, who was a great friend of mine, but no relation to the Mr. Peckam with whom I lived. He was a graduate of Harvard Law School, went to high school with me, and we were very close friends. He and I came into the Mr. Burdick's office in 1918. Well, I came in 1918, and he came the following spring in 1919. And then, after Mr. McLeod left the firm, he left the firm after the Second World War. Let's see, after the First World War. Mr. Burdick eventually took Peckam and me in, became Burdick, Corcoran, Peckam. And then after that, Mr. Hayes came in. Mr. Burdick died in 1948, and eventually the firm became Corcoran, Peckam and Hayes. That's where it is today. But the firm, the law office was located on Thames Street, right near the government landing, right across from Cotton's Court. And that office dates back, I guess, to the middle of the last century.
Oh.
So this office over 100 years old, well over 100 years old.
Quite remarkable.
Yeah, well, Sheffield's office, same way. Old Mr. Sheffield, the contemporary Francis P. Peckam, had a son, William P. Sheffield, who went to Congress, and he had a son, William P. Sheffield, and William P. Sheffield had a son, Richard Sheffield, who's now the present. Have you met him?
Yes,
yeah,
he's our neighbor.
Oh yes, of course he is. Yeah, that's right. Well, he's the great grandson of the original William P. Sheffield. So those two firms are neck and neck as far as longevity.
Yes, and there's many generations.
Yeah,
that's
right.
You have a third generation of your family.
Yeah, now I have a third generation of my family. Yeah, that's right.
Well, how did you decide to go into law?
Well, I think I had a great admiration growing up for Mr. Francis B. Peckam. And, you know, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Looking back, I think that must have been it, that I admired him so much. And, of course, he was my great patron because he left money for my education.
Oh, he did?
And he died when I was 10 years old. He died in 1903. Well, I never had any questions. These boys today, they don't know what they want to do, but I always want to go to the law.
Well, that was wonderful. And where were you educated? Where did you go to school?
Now, I went to a private school that was located on the corner of Tour Street and Whitfield Place, right opposite the fire station there. I know you're familiar. Near the Historical Society, you know, right up the street from the Historical Society. That school was run by two ladies, one by the name of Miss Sayer, S-A-Y-E-R, and the other by Miss Caroline Wilkes. They were both very good teachers. And in that school, I suppose there were, maybe 20 or 25 pupils. And I stayed there until my second year in high school. I went to Rogers in my second year. I didn't go the first year in Rogers. And I think it was I got a very good fundamental education then.
Was this school coeducational or just boys?
Oh no, co-ed.
Co-ed.
We didn't have that distinction. You know, the elementary schools were all co-ed. Yeah. There were more girls than boys in it, but Bill Sheffield went there for a while, and I can think of 4 or 5 boys that were there.
Now, how far was the school from your home?
Only about Tour Street, then Bonnie Street, then Mann Avenue, and you go down Mann Avenue and the street running through from Mann Avenue to, Bull Street. From Bull Street to Mann Avenue is where I lived, so I'd say, 2 blocks.
So it was,
3 blocks.
So you easily walked.
Yeah, I walked to school every day.
Right.
That's right. So.
Tell me what, when you were that age in grammar school and early high school, when you weren't going to school, what did you do for fun and recreation? Did you have any kind of organized sports at school?
No. No, we back at the school there was a big lot, and we used to go out there and play all sorts of games, cops and robbers, and then we played out in the court, tag and things like that. No, there wasn't. There was no organized sports in those days.
So what did you do? What did you and your friends do besides, did you play any baseball and that sort of thing?
Oh, yes. We had, there was a family that I was very closely associated with named Langley. Alfred G. Langley was a musician. He taught piano. He also was organist in the Congregational Church, and he lived right down the street on School Street, corner of School and Tour, right across from the Christian Science and Historical Society. And his oldest boy was quite an organizer, and he organized a club called the Hilton Club. And I was a member of the Hilton Club, and that club had baseball teams. We didn't play football, but we had baseball teams, and that was about it for sport. His oldest boy was a viola player in the Boston Philharmonic, Boston Symphony, and also later in the New York Philharmonic.
Oh.
He's a very talented violinist.
Yeah.
One of my great interests in those days, through another son of Mr. Langley, Howard Langley, was brooking. We used to go out on Saturday morning all over the island and follow the brooks on the island down to their sources.
Oh.
You know, down to the ocean. That was great fun. We'd take a picnic, take a sandwich or something, and be out all day. And we got to know the island very well that way.
Sure you did.
So that was neat. And in those days, there was always something to do. But organized sport, except for our baseball team, no, there wasn't any.
How was in the summer, the beaches? What were the beaches like in those days?
The first beach in Newport was the place to go in summertime. That's where everybody went. They developed the beach. They had a private bathing section, and then they had a boardwalk that extended down almost, 2/3 of the length of the beach. And along that boardwalk, there were all sorts of little shops, and a roller coaster, and a big convention hall, and a big restaurant for shore dinners. And that's where everybody went. That was the place in the summer. And the excursion boats used to come down from Providence every day in the summer and dock at Commercial Wharf, and the trolley car went down the wharf, and they'd load on the trolley car and down to the beaches. So, and then at the beach, they had these, I suppose we used to call them buttboards. They were long wagons with maybe 3 or 4 tiers of seats, you know.
Yeah.
And people would hire those, and they'd be driven around the Ocean Drive and told all sorts of fabricated stories about the wealthy people.
Yeah. Remember any of those houses going up on Ocean Drive? Most of them were probably already there. Some were still being built around the turn of the century. I think.
The first house, as you go around the drive, right back of what we call Bailey's Beach, Spouting Rock Beach, that big white house stands up there. That was owned by Mrs. Fish, Mrs. Stuyvesant Fish. She was supposed to be the leader of society at that time. She had all sorts of parties there, you know, which I knew nothing about, but I'd heard about them afterwards. That was one of the places. I don't remember too many places around the drive at that time.
Local people in Newport think about these places, and summer homes have been built in Newport for hundreds of years, but when people began to build those great palatial places, what could you think that
I don't know.
The local people thought of it?
I don't know. You see, they were all in place before I got to be an age where I noticed any of those things. I think the Breakers was built in 1893 during that period.
That's right.
Yeah. They were all up and well established, and of course, as I told you the other day, the people came there to those houses.
Well, tell me again.
Well, they came in the summer, and they brought with them a retinue of servants, although they had quite a few local people too. Usually they were interested in, they had their own coaches and their own carriages, so they came with a number of horses, which were stables. You know, they had stables around. Take the breakers, they had the stables down on Corcoran Avenue. And the husbands went back and forth to New York. They came up for weekends and they went back, you know, Monday morning or Sunday night. And they went either on the New York boat from Newport to New York, or they went by a steamer over to Wickford and then took a little shuttle train to Wickford Junction and took the train there to New York. And that was a common thing. And of course, in those days, all of these big estates had beautiful gardens and employed quite a few gardeners to take care of them. And that was a very profitable occupation. And there's some very fine gardeners who came to Newport, established here. Very often Scotch descent, you know. And they were a source, the summer people, the summer colony was a source of considerable revenue to the city of Newport. I suppose the summer people, the Navy, that's about it. We had very few industries here. Various industries came and never seemed to make a go of it, you know. Common Sense Gum Factory came here, and they eventually left. And apparently the labor supply was limited here and didn't attract labor from outside, so they never made a go of it here.
So being an island has something to do with that too? The reason why industry?
I suppose so. In those days, of course, the only bridge was out at Tiverton, the old stone bridge. There was a bridge for the trains and a bridge for carriages, horse-drawn vehicles. But there was no, of course, the Newport, the Mount Hope Bridge wasn't built till long after that. So they were pretty isolated. And by and large, the greater part of the island was a farming community. I've seen, you know, the time when most of your houses would be along the main roads, and all the backland was farm country, which is nice.
It is nice. So a lot of that has certainly changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. But it's, the whole lifestyle of Newport has changed, I'd say, in the last when did the Navy go out of here?
Mid-70s, from 73.
Was it 72? Well, the lifestyle has changed with the departure of the Navy because of the tourist business developing kind of entirely different.
Yeah.
Newport didn't change much up to the 60s, you know, 1960, didn't change very much.
What kind of an influence does the Navy have on the town up till that time?
Well, by and large, I think the relations between the Navy and the townspeople have always been very good. The Navy contributed a great deal to Newport. On the other hand, when it was a training center here for the sailors, they weren't any worse than any large group of young boys, you know. there were a lot of, in a way, there was a lot of patronage of the saloons and things of that sort. But really, even with all those boys, there was no violence like there is today. You know, we didn't have the robberies or all the crimes that Newport. Oh yeah. I'd say the relations were very good between the Navy and the townspeople. We surely hated to see them go. But, of course, now, the Navy that you have on the island is highly skilled people and high salary brackets too. The payroll of the Navy is still very heavy in Newport. We say the Navy's gone. It hasn't gone. We have a great many officers here. We have the Naval War College, and we have the Underwater Ordnance with a lot of technology, and a lot of this industrial park is filled with people that are selling the software to the Navy, you know. I think it's still a
new industry, really.
That's right. That's right.
Before we, well, let's get back a bit to, we were talking about the summer people, and you were describing to me the other day about your observances, particularly their Sunday, their coach rides on Sunday. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
I can recall, and everybody did it, going up on the avenue opposite the casino and all along that section of the avenue on a Sunday, and in the afternoon, early afternoon, there'd be a regular parade of these four-horse coaches. Sometimes with the coaches there were phaetons, you know, driven by two horses, and those people had, they were high, of course, and they had a coachman and a footman in front, and then they have a footman sometimes in the rear. And very often the horses would be all decorated with rosettes on their bridles, and the people all dressed up with the high hats, and the women all flowering gowns, and really, they were on exhibition, and they enjoyed it, and the people enjoyed seeing them, you know. And they were very, there was no association with those people, with the summer people, with the Newport people, except in business dealings or in service.
But not socially.
Not socially. Oh no, no. There's a very, very decided line there. No one would think, you know, being admitted to some of these places, if they tried to be admitted, they wouldn't be admitted. They were people that the local people felt was all right to get as much out of them as they could, and the summer people got to expect it. There was a practice. The butlers or the cooks had great power in those establishments. They did all the ordering, with the result that the townspeople, the butchers and the bakers and the candlestick makers, all did business with the cooks or the butlers. And what went on in the way of compensation, you know, it was a recognized thing. There's a very interesting story that Mrs. Harold Brown told about Mrs. Harold Brown. That mean anything?
You were talking about Mrs. Harold Brown.
There was a coal dealer here in Newport. This is illustrative what I'm saying about the power of the cooks and the butlers. And he had been furnishing coal to Mrs. Harold Brown for a number of years. And this particular year, he didn't get the order. So he went to Mrs. Harold Brown and asked for an interview, and he said, he thought he gave a good service. Yes, you always have, Mr. Brown, Mr. Hayes, his name was Hayes. But he said the cook apparently made arrangements with another coal dealer. And she said, well, Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But you know, I can always find someone to sell me coal, but I can't always get a good cook.
Oh, dear.
So unfortunately, she condoned it. They all condoned that practice. And she was, by the way, a very, very nice, real Newport woman. Some of these people, just came here for the summer, but the Browns were more or less had
John
their
Nicholas
roots.
Brown family, the Providence
Yeah,
Brown.
that's right. They had their roots here in Rhode Island and in Providence and Newport. And she was I've met Mrs. Brown. She was a real lady, a very, very fine person. So she really was regretful that it happened. But that tells the story. That's the way it was.
Yeah. And it was accepted on both sides. There wasn't any real resentment in the town.
No, it was the way of life. Mm-hmm. And of course, I suspect that if any arrangement that was made was worth anything